The following is a fan-made reading of the Pale web serial novel by J.C. McCrae. It describes extra material published after Chapter 8.a and contains spoilers for that chapter. The original text can be found at palewebserial.wordpress.com. If you'd like to donate to the author, please go to patreon.com/wildbow. Thank you for listening. 8.a New Other Correspondence Number 1. Subject: Correspondence and Updates. From Matthew Moss, mossball@mooseboop.ca. CC'd Verona, V. Hayward@tbaynorth.ca. Avery, A. Kelly@tbaynorth.ca. Lucy, L. Ellingson@tbaynorth.ca.
Can we correspond? Do your parents read your emails?
Email reply from Verona. If they did, then your email would be very alarming, Mr. Strange Adult who has to keep lots of secrets from our parents. Correspond away. Email reply from Avery. This is a school district email, though, so I guess we could make new emails, but that doesn't really work. Email reply from Verona. Connection blockers work okay. Subject: The new Kennet Others. General details. From Matthew Moss. Attached: cblock.jpg.
Okay, that should do. Ian and I wanted to keep you girls in the loop as we finalize some deals. You should know the Kennet Council's mentality and goals. What we were looking for. We want others who, 1, play nice with humans, 2, play nice with us, and 3, work with what we're trying to build. We're also trying to cover weaknesses, ways enemies can come at us or gaps in the perimeter they could slip through. In some cases, we were after power. Power does not mean the ability to fight. Some came and are feeding the perimeter. The box your friend Zed gave us as our share from the choir wasn't nearly enough. The deal we made is that all the new goblins together get 1 vote. All 9 of other new Kennet Others get 1 vote. This is to help keep us from being co-opted. We didn't want a block of new others to come in and outvote those of us who have been here all along. They could take control that way. There are groups out there that would try. Every new member has 2 sponsors. If new members come and there are no issues after 1 year, then they become half members for 1 year, half a vote each, and full members a year after. To put it simply, the only way this process gets interrupted is if 1, they break a major rule, 2, 5+ of us vote to kick them out, which can be part of number 1 above, for a cause, and 3, either sponsor says no. Sponsors will know them best and be able to keep eyes on them. Sponsors will check in regularly to make sure that they are being good and helping out. Sponsors can also act as go-betweens and have some idea of how that other works, mostly. The deals are complicated, and some vary slightly with specifics about what "for a cause" means and what rules are, but all have agreed to these terms. We'll send some emails as I confirm details with sponsors and the others themselves about who joined and their background and details.
Subject: Nibble and Chloe. Attached: cblock2.jpg.
Nibble and Chloe are ghouls. Specifically, Nibble is a couch ghoul, and Chloe is either a profane or NDE ghoul. Sponsored by myself, Matthew, and Original Goblins, T.S. Gash Blunt. Nibble spent too long on the cusp of barely surviving while sitting in front of a flickering screen. Life gave up on him, and death was not alerted to claim him. Legal authorities eventually wrote him off as dead. The power shut off, and when the screens went black, he lost his last light and connection to the outside world, was thrust into undeath. This is fairly standard for couch ghouls, with only some minor differences in context and circumstance. Nibble had early inheritance money to live off of after mass family death. Nibble, as a couch ghoul, leans more heavily into the light/dark dynamic than some other ghoul types. Was more ghoulish than partner Chloe for a long period of time. probably owing to him being a ghoul for longer. He can't give us a clear timetable except by referencing old TV. Appears as a 20-something male, is skinny and pale, with claws and teeth he can hide. Unlike other ghouls, he doesn't sleep like the dead outside the hunt phase and is thus easier to contact. Good for us. Nibble gets low levels of sustenance from games and TV and artificial light, like plants and sun. My initial read after several conversations is that he is very mellow and jokey by nature, but this is heavily suppressed by stress over current circumstances. See below. Chloe was overseas with a group of friends when the group inadvertently intruded on an important funeral and offended rural locals. Vigilante justice followed. They were harassed and captured and made to turn on each other, on Chloe, and then released battered and bruised. Chloe's humanity leached away soon after, and she became a ghoul. We don't know the specifics of her becoming a ghoul, but from what I remember, two possibilities stand out. The first is that she is a profane ghoul. Nibble's rendition of her story is that the friends were tied up and made to decide who was most responsible for the offense, and they named Chloe, thinking she would die. They were released and started on their way home, and then Chloe was released and caught up. She later attacked and devoured them. If she is a profane ghoul, then she was cursed between the time they were released and the time that she was, and this pushed her into that knife's edge state between life and death. Curse-oriented origin would mean she is more focused on right and wrong, and law and justice, and maliciousness. Second possibility is she is a NDE ghoul, or near-death experience ghoul. Same story, but without the curse. If she nearly died or came to the razor's edge of death's embrace, by being hurt enough, or a metaphorical hair's breadth from hanging, or being shot, or another execution, and stayed there long enough, that could push her to become a ghoul. This state and otherhood may have allowed her to fight her way free and deal with her captors. I can't remember the specifics about NDE ghouls. Resilience? The question may no longer matter. Chloe is not doing well, and has lost much of her humanity. Distinctions fall away, and she has the weaknesses of both. Chloe has more pronounced fangs and claws, and waking-sleeping cycles. Is more feral. Nibble and Chloe met alongside a third while foraging for sustenance. As ghouls, they eat dead matter. The three became a foraging pack, and became romantically involved as part of this. In summer 2019, they had a scarcity of accessible food. Efforts to curtail ghoul population restricted access to common foraging grounds. This caused the ultimate death frenzy of their third, who became so hungry she lost all sense of caution and put herself in the way of hunters. And Chloe's steep decline and loss of humanity followed soon after. Subject best avoided with Nibble. Lots of self-blame. Nibble was not aware the other two could not get some small sustenance from television, as he did, and they were not clear about how poorly they were doing. We took them on because they are fairly effective in a scrap, and they can see life and smell death. Their ability to see life means they can notice many of those who might try to slip the perimeter. The smelling of death means they may notice the aftermath of any trouble caused by any intruders, bodies and dead residents and dead animals. Nibble is focused on Chloe's state, and Chloe is focused on her own circumstances. We all hope they can find some equilibrium, now that they're spending less time moving on and avoiding hunters. For you three, expect wariness around practitioners. They are fine to talk to and approach, but I would not put my own hand within reach of a snap from Chloe's mouth. Be appropriately careful. I suspect you three make a more tempting meal than my doom-hosting self.
Email reply from Lucy. Do we know who hunted them? Email reply from Verona. Texts at school say NDE ghouls can get stronger as you push them to the brink of death. Or they may not be more resilient at all, they just don't get as weak as we do when they get more hurt, so they keep going right up until they fall over and die for real. They get best sustenance from the recently dead, especially if they were scared when they die. Best sustenance isn't more sustenance, is what pushes her closest to balance between life and death. Can't find the same kind of details on profane ghouls. They're a footnote in this book. They seem to be rare. Might mean it's more likely Chloe is a NDE type. Email reply from Matthew Moss.
Verona, there you have it. I'll pass that on to Nibble. He'll want to know that. We'll tell the goblins in charge of him and Chloe and E. Lucy, no idea who wanted them.
Email reply from Avery. What plus who was their third member of the pack? Email reply from Matthew Moss.
Faith. Became a ghoul after getting infected by another ghoul. The death that runs through them can leach into another person who doesn't have enough life, because they're hurt and because other reasons.
Email reply from Verona. Sometimes called the standard ghoul, the ghoul scion, the branch ghoul, or the family ghoul. Pyramid scheme type power. It flows uphill, you get anchored more if you create more ghouls. At the bottom, and if you're new, then existence is hard. As you get higher, you get the really strong and dangerous necrophage types. I think they should be called ghoul fathers. No real obvious strengths and weaknesses, except the ghoul scion is even better than regular ghouls at making more scions and gets stronger by doing it. Email reply from Lucy.
I think we should move on.
Email reply from Lucy. CC, Verona, Avery, and not Matthew. But save the info on binding all types just in case. Email reply from Verona. Thumbs up emoji. Subject: Goblin gangs. Attached: cblock3.jpg.
10 new goblins include Group 1,
Tatty Bojangles,
Bumcake, Bangnut, Humpy Dump, and one unnamed. Group 2, Cream-Filled, Kitty Cough, Fish Middens, Ram Jam, and Biscuit. The new goblins come in 2 groups. Group 1 tried to invade when the perimeter went down and were deterred. Group 2 were brought in by Blunt Munch and have worked with him before. Some in Group 2 may stay or leave depending on how things go. Taddy's gang are minor vandals and troublemakers who have spent the last few years going from misadventure to misadventure. Most of these actions were unsuccessful and or mystifying to mundane humans. Recent efforts include one attempt to break into a gun range and steal weaponry, despite the fact that few in the group are of a size to hold a gun, and none are of a size to easily carry and aim one. One effort to steal the curbside trash of a minor actress and auction it off online. The most literate and tech-savvy of the group is the gremlin Bangnut, and he writes and uses a computer at the level of a second grader. After weeks of no replies on the illegible auctions, they abandoned the ploy. Apparently their own trash mingled with the stolen trash, and they felt it was irresponsible to risk auctioning their stuff instead of hers. A campaign to erect large and detailed snowdongs in mysterious locations across and around the city, and one effort to steal a tiger from the Toronto Zoo as a pet and mascot. This halved the size of their group. Group 2 is a pre-formed group of goblins who have helped Blunt Munch on jobs requiring many hands. Often this is looting and the coordinated carrying of heavy objects. They operate and cooperate surprisingly well as a unit when it comes to simple tasks. They have spent the last 5 years renting an apartment in what to goblins is luxury and safety. Their old leader was a Todd. Todds are goblins specializing in befriending and enabling a perpetually inebriated human, or othered human, through drinks and drugs, as their imaginary friend. This human, referred to as a Barney, was a way for their group to launder money and handle simple tasks, and pay rent. When the Barney moved on, the group was left leaderless. Creamfilled held the reins for a short time, but is content to pass on control to Blunt Munch. We've provided an apartment similar to their last one, and they are happy to have a task. Kennett's OG goblins, John and I, are keeping an eye on the two groups. They give us more eyes and more ways to harass intruders. Toadswallow thinks having more goblins gives us more cover by making us more like a normal town our size, but I think that take is a reach. Double-edged sword. They add up to a lot of small nuisances and headaches, and that includes a few for the locals. Edith is reading over my shoulder and stresses a lot of small nuisances and headaches.
Email reply from Avery. I'm a little goblined out. Second group especially sounds like they're pretty good. Email reply from Verona. Hey Matthew, is my little man the snot painter the unnamed one? Email reply from Matthew Moss.
He is. He wants you to name him. Normally a right for someone important in a goblin's life. I think he really likes you.
Email reply from Lucy. First Tashlet and now a snot painter? What are you getting up to when we aren't watching? Email reply from Avery. Are the paintings good? Email reply from Verona. I'm getting up to meeting cool others. No idea if they're good. Naming a guy's a huge responsibility. I need to think on this. Email reply from Avery. How will they react to practitioners? Team 1 and Team 2 would react different, I'm guessing? Email reply from Matthew Moss.
Who knows? They're goblins.
Email reply from Avery. Any recommendations on making a good first impression? I think that matters more for goblins than others. Email reply from Matthew Moss.
Who knows? They're goblins.
Email reply from Avery. Yeah. Email reply from Lucy. We'll ask around. Subject: Montague. Attached: cblock4.jpg.
Our best guess is that Montague is a folded or corrupted spirit. He was a spirit, or something spirit-like, and a powerful ritual, or something, either altered him as a side effect of being too close, like a person or animal caught up in the gears of industrial machinery, dash a bird wounded by a wind power plant, dash churned up by the automated plow in the fields, or transmuted the forces of an area, and transmuted him in the process, and now he transmutes other things. Montague isn't intact or standalone enough to spend much time unstructured, so he borrows the structure of other things. He is apparent even to those unaware as a pool of blood or an oily red coating that slips along the ground or into and over objects. When he occupies an object, be that object a picture or radio or box or anything else, he alters its appearance to be grim and bent and battered. A derelict car may be filled to the brim with what appears to be blood, with branching and zigzagging spider legs reaching out. A picture on the wall may appear to be painted in blood, with twitching legs reaching from the corners of the frame. It takes him a few moments to get settled, and he can lash out with these appendages to form the settlement. If the object can communicate, then he can as well, in a limited fashion, like a radio voice or tapping. He has helped in a few cases with making sure invaders cannot settle too easily or put down roots. It disconcerts them when the campfire at the edge of town goes out and the smoking wood starts oozing and growing appendages. Mostly, however, Montague is providing us with power. He can take some structure from diagrams and things and has been attaching himself to our perimeter to fuel it. He does this for about an hour at the quietest time of night, just before dawn. The limited time is less about him having the power to spare, he does okay, and more about his influence inevitably altering the perimeter. Left too long with it, he would absorb it and make it a part of himself and alter its function. As is, he gives us an hour a day we can unplug the box Zed gave us, and the perimeter will rev up, but the atmosphere in town changes. Similar influence to the aftermath of the Carmine Beast, but revved up. Fighting, and violence, and stress, and more echoes. Then, for a few hours after, sunrise and the city waking up, the perimeter will hum along nicely while plugged into the box. We are overlapping the night and day shifts to fit during this time, and using this as an excuse to check Kennet itself for trouble, instead of watching and patrolling the metaphorical borders. If there is anything that has slipped through, then a loop of a Montague-infused diagram encircling Kennet seems to give it a kick in the ass and make it show itself. A bit angrier and stronger than it would be otherwise, but we manage. If you are awake when we do this, then you should notice him starting his shift. Unawakened people up and about in the small hours of the night may get a bad feeling, or have to deal with rogue spirits and echoes and agitated animals. Trade-offs. As you may guess, the influence the CB death had in the area drew Montague here. He came from the site of some ritual or big practice and has no recollection of what the ritual was or who and what he was before. Edith and Alpina are sponsoring him. Good guy all considered, but was not easy to get on board. Negotiation was halting, and he was resistant to the terms until Edith and Alpina softened him up. I think companionship with them and with Tashlet were more impactful than any amount of quibbling over terms of membership and how he might get kicked out. Second hardest to bring on board. First hardest will be covered in next batch after I talk to people today.
Email reply from Avery. I was just reading notes from Elementals class I missed. Montague sounds like an elemental. Fragile and needs a vessel and has lots of power to spare. Email reply from Verona. Yep. Elemental seems to map to this, yes. Thumbs up emoji. Looked up folded spirit and didn't find much, but did find about plicate spirits. Fits Monty here. So when you do big rituals, especially realms practices, like opening doors between our world and spirit or our world and abyss, looking at you, Ave, you can catch bystanders in the way as space folds and worlds bend to make room, especially if you rush it or do a bad diagram. If that bystander is a human, you can get a horror that's all stretched out and bent and operates by slightly different rules. Horrors. The plicate spirit is this, but for spirits, or plicate echo, or plicate elemental. Folded up, stretched out, twist up with something else, and operating by different logic. Think implicate and plicate, folded, crumpled, or corrugated in biology. This book sums a lot of it up as each one is different, so no one thing works perfectly. Apply lots of fire, and here's how you should diagnose or deal with a plicate spirit overriding your diagram, which is basically cut off all power and run. Not very useful stuff. Email reply from Matthew Moss.
Elemental makes sense. The girl by candlelight, as Edith, is like that. She has a lot of elemental at her heart, powering the spirit side of her. It's what makes her so impressive when she steps free of Edith. You three sure got an education.
Email reply from Lucy. CC, Verona, Avery, and not Matthew. Easy does it on talking about binding and dealing with, Ronnie. Email reply from Lucy. Matthew, I caught that about bird and wind power. Don't do that. Other forms of power kill way more birds. Be one of the cool baby boomers, Matthew. Sunglasses emoji. Email reply from Matthew Moss.
I'm a millennial.
Email reply from Lucy. Then act like one. Don't act like a crusty old 40-plus guy, old man emoji, and do research, and don't buy into environmental propaganda. Were you trying to be clever? Email reply from Avery. Lucy is visibly annoyed sitting at the desk in our room with her laptop right now. Email reply from Matthew Moss.
I was not trying to be clever. I was reaching for examples, and that came to mind. Retracted. Sorry.
Subject: Sig. Attached: cblock5.jpg.
Ambulatory object. Sig is a fairly old other, from what we can tell, and has traveled from place to place by jumping from locations where cigarettes are used. Since the ban on indoor smoking, it keeps close to the roads and has been traveling Canada. It jumps from rest stop to truck to hazy bar, a mostly intact and smoking cigarette with nobody to claim it. If picked up and smoked by someone unaware, it will stay with them for a time, then burn the fingers so it is dropped and will disappear to appear somewhere nearby. Motivations are hard to discern. Sig doesn't think like you or I might. We have to infer from where it goes and what it picks out. That it came here and seems to want to stick around. It accepted the terms given without issue and has already taken to indicating desired votes as one of the new others. Edith writes options down and Sig will burn the paper to indicate a choice. Sig avoids places where smoking is not allowed or does not happen, and this does include patches of nature where cigarette butts couldn't be found littered here or there. We think this is because it cannot easily move to places where cigarettes are not in some sort of use. Sig does not sleep and is very active as an observer. One of two others we have mingling with incoming humans and potential practitioners. Sig hangs out around the motel and bed and breakfast and gas stations and watches newcomers. Part of this is to catch those others who blend in with the crowd, and part is to watch for any witch hunters or practitioners who may be paying attention to what is happening. Sig seems to gravitate toward interesting people. It doesn't shy from addicts or criminals, just the opposite. It also likes world-weary travelers and the rambling elderly so long as they have a story to tell. It may be best to think of it less as an object and more of one or all of these types of people bundled together. If they gather together and talk while sitting around a heaping ashtray, then Sig is the old man, and old woman, and criminal, and weary traveler, and trucker, and addict, and teenager, all tied up into one, that is sitting and listening at the table, with their cigarette lit but not yet smoked, with the person subtracted from the picture. At the risk of injecting personality where there is none, Sig is nonviolent and passive, an observer and listener rather than an actor. It seems to prefer to avoid violence and sometimes remains behind after alerting us about potential threats. Sig has been around for roughly 100 years, and has some familiarity with various lords and long-standing others. It has had two prominent owners we know of. The first, a witch hunter who collected magic items and appreciated an endless cigarette without recognizing the sentience. The second, an alchemist, who fell victim to an explosion while working on their own work. The explosion seems to have scarred Sig with a telltale abrasion at one side. Sig is clear that it had no involvement in the explosion and seems to dislike the topic. Sig is sponsored by Edith and myself. Initially it was Marichika instead of me, but Marichika became annoyed by the smell, and there were others, covered in the next batch, Marichika could sponsor. Edith has unfortunately picked up smoking again. I'm annoyed. Please don't follow our lead. Smoking Sig has no effects that regular cigarettes don't, and Sig doesn't carry anything from location to location, including saliva and germs, but it's really not good for you.
Email reply from Verona. Girls, I am thinking about taking up smoking. Email reply from Avery. No, Verona. Email reply from Lucy. No, gross. Email reply from Matthew Moss.
Gross.
Email reply from Verona. Any chance Sig can point us to that alchemist's blown-up lab? Maybe we can forage? Was it recent? Or close? Email reply from Matthew Moss.
You would have to ask. I would, but communicating takes time.
Email reply from Lucy. We can try it. I wanted to ask how you are, Matthew. Are you guys managing? Come back soon. Email reply from Matthew Moss.
Tired. 50-hour weeks at work and then managing these others and negotiations. Edith's reading over my shoulder as I lie in bed, typing this, but she struggles with leading alone. A little too harsh. She often regrets her choices after. I come at things tired. She comes at things hard. We find an equilibrium, but it's not easy.
Email reply from Avery. We can help once we get back. Can we take over duties? And not to pressure, but we were talking and I was wondering if we get votes. Email reply from Lucy. Avery's being nice about it. I was the one wondering. Email reply from Avery. You were also the one wondering what we could do to help make things easier for Matthew and Edith. We have a responsibility to protect Kenneth as Kenneth's practitioners. Email reply from Verona. Do you need extra eyes in any of the others? Email reply from Matthew Moss.
You get votes. Obviously, some things leave you out, just as some things would leave me out. Thank you for wanting to help. John informed me of how strongly you felt about protecting Kenneth. It's appreciated. Some help with the perimeter guarding, and keeping an eye on the others would be good, but some are pricklier than others. Tashlet and Sig are easiest, and most willing to let me pass on info. This is why I told you the stuff I did earlier. Goblins are a roll of the dice, really. Then there are warier others, like Montague and Nibble and Chloe. 5 more new others to cover. 4 if you discount Tashlet, whom I already introduced. I need a day to get my thoughts in order. Some of these guys aren't easy, and a couple aren't, so play nice with others, play nice with us, play nice with practitioners. Sorry. We were struggling to fill gaps in the defenses, and this is what we ended up with. Need the day to ask and negotiate what I can share with you and sort out my explanations. After stopping in at work tomorrow, I'll send out emails about Tashlet, and Liz, and Jabber, and Ken. And one other I can't name without negotiating permission. If you're getting home in a couple of days, then I want you to have this before you arrive, so you have your eyes open. Let me know if you need a ride. I know you said Zed offered, and you are the paths, but I wouldn't mind the chance to escape from things for a bit.
This has been a fan-made reading of extra material from the web serial Pale by J.C. McCrae. Read by me, viceVersailes. I use she/hers. The original text can be found at palewebserial.wordpress.com. If you'd like to donate to the author, please go to patreon.com/wildbow. Thank you for listening.